Good morning, everyone, and how are we doing? So this is Div Conduit on your screen. And I'm here to explain a passage of the scriptures to us. That's 1 Corinthians. We started from verse 17 and then to chapter 2. But I won't be able to finish this in this series. In the next episode, I will be concluding on the subject. But my major emphasis is on how the gospel is the power and also is the wisdom of God. So concerning Corinth, the church at Corinth, that's 1 Corinthians, there's a background story to the letter that epistle that Paul wrote to them. Paul had been in Corinth to teach them initially. He has gone there to teach them, then to disciples, to raise individuals. After Paul left, I think certain individuals came around and taught them some things. So Paul would write to them to emphasize what he taught them and what he explained to them from the scriptures. That's why if you check, starting from verse 16, you see Paul said, I baptize also the household of Stephanas. Beside, I know not whether I baptize any other. Now see verse 17. For Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel, not with wisdom of words, lest the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. So Paul was trying to shift their focus from baptism. That means there's something that has been taught them, or some practice that has come into them concerning baptism. When you go to 1 Corinthians chapter 15, we see where Paul emphasized the baptism of the dead. That means Paul was trying to tell them, I didn't teach you this. There's something in particular in which I emphasized when I was with you. And what was that thing? You see him said in that verse, he said, for Christ sent me not to baptize, but to preach the gospel. That means what Paul did was that he preached the gospel to them. And that's what he wants to emphasize again in their mind. That he came to preach the gospel to them. But he said he didn't come to preach it to them with the wisdom of words. He didn't teach them by the wisdom of men or with the wisdom of words. Rather, he said, because if he does that with wisdom of words, he said the cross of Christ should be made of none effect. So you see two things in where I just read. You see the preaching of the gospel, and Paul saying that he did not preach it with the wisdom of words. Because if he does it with the wisdom of words, that the cross will have no effect. That means the purpose of the crucifixion of Christ will not have effect. The power will not be felt amidst them. So what is the wisdom of words? I want us to read verse 18 and verse 19. Verse 18 says, for the preaching of the cross is to them that perish foolishness, but unto us it is which are saved, it is the power of God. So he said, the preaching of the gospel to them who are perishing, it is foolishness. That means there are people that are perishing, in which when you preach that gospel to, it does not make sense to them. But to us it is the power of God. Now see verse 19. They said, for it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise. Now, what is the wisdom? You see, he used the word wisdom of words. Now, making us to know that the wisdom of words, there is the wisdom of the wise in verse 19. He said he will bring to nothing the understanding of the prudent. So he said the wisdom of the wise. Now, who are the wise people he's talking about here? See verse 20. Where is the wise? Where is the scribe? Where is the disputer of this word? Now, don't forget, you've seen in verse 17 that he called it the wisdom of words. In verse 19, he called it the wisdom of the wise. So they said, who are these wise people? He said, these wise people, they are described. That means people that are learned. He then said again that they are the disputer of this word. The word disputer there means people that are very good with argument. People that argues. A modern word that is relative to the word disputer here is the word philosophers. People that have been taught on how to argue things out. So when you now go back to verse 17, Paul said he didn't come to preach the gospel by what? By the wisdom of words. That means he didn't come to preach to them the gospel out by arguing or disputing with them. But rather, what? He preached to them in a plain language. He didn't come as a philosopher to argue things out with them. But rather, he came to preach to them the plain message of the gospel, which is Christ's crucifixion. Now, when you then go to verse 21, I'll read to verse 23 now, or to verse 24. It said, for after that, in the wisdom of God, the world by wisdom knew not God. It pleased God by the foolishness of preaching to save them that believe. For Jews require a sign, and the Greeks seek after wisdom. But we preach Christ crucified, unto the Jew a stumbling block, and unto the Greek foolishness. But unto them that are called, both Jews and Greek, Christ the power of God and the wisdom of God. That means that the wisdom of God is seen by the preaching. The wisdom of God is not seen by argument. That means a philosopher will come and argue to you or argue with you. That is not the wisdom of God, but rather the wisdom of God, it is the preaching of the crucifixion, the preaching of the message of Christ's redemption, dying for us. That is the wisdom of God. That means God's wisdom is in the preaching and not in the argument. can say it is the argument is not the preaching of the gospel. Rather, God has made it known that the gospel of Christ will be made known by what? By preaching his crucifixion. And he said it is the power of God. That means if you read in context very well, there's what called the wisdom of God and also the wisdom of this world. What is the wisdom of God? It is preaching. And what is the wisdom of this world? It is argument. So you see the wisdom of God and also the wisdom of men. Now the wisdom of God, actually, it is the power of God, as he said. But the wisdom of men, he called it foolishness to God, because it is a stumbling block to them. It would not make them to see the calling in which God wants them to see about the message. So when you now go to chapter 2 of that 1 Corinthians, I know we built a context already. Now when I go to chapter 2 verse 1, it says, I, brethren, when I came to you, came not with excellence of speech or of wisdom. What is the excellence of speech or of wisdom here? It is, I did not come to you with argument, but rather declaring the testimony of God. That means Paul did not go to them to argue with them. Rather, he went there to preach the gospel. And what's the gospel? The crucifixion of Christ. In the next episode, we are going to see from that verse 1, chapter 2, verse 1, we are going to see downward how Paul emphasized more on the power of God, which is the gospel, the preaching of the gospel, the preaching of crucifixion. And also we are going to see how he spoke about the wisdom of God, which is unto us God's power. I trust you are blessed already. So watch out for the next episode. This is Deep Conduit on your screen.